Hello, welcome to the next instalment of the bite-size Blueprint Blether. Today's topic is going to be based around Scrum School and a bit of strength and conditioning. And when we were having a think about which guest we would like to join in with this one, there was one choice and one choice only.
Not me.
Sorry, fortunately it wasn't you, James. So, but we've shipped in the big rig all the way down from Inverness for this one. He drove his Arctic lorry down the road and he's well fueled. But Sinky, do you want to introduce yourself formally, please?
How are you doing? Yeah, thanks for having me on. So my name's Sinclair Patience and I'm the Game Development Manager for Caledonia North. So like you said, based out of Inverness and cover the whole of the north basically. So Highlands and Islands and then down to Aberdeen all the way across to Loch Aber. So big region.
Nice, yeah, great to have you on. So what's been going on at the moment then? What's all been happening?
So it's been busy. As you'll know, in the last since Christmas time, really, we've kicked off Scrum School. So really big initiative, really important initiative within Scottish Rugby, which is really set to focus on the front row in particular. So throughout the last 3-4 months, we've been running practical workshops throughout the country. Those are targeted at coaches just to teach them a bit more about the scrum in particular. But we've also worked with a number of players as well. So to date, we've had about 260 coaches run through the practical workshops, which is brilliant. We're not finished yet. We've still got a couple of months to go. So I think by the end of May, we'll have hit about 350 coaches throughout the country. And then following the practical workshops, we're actually going to run into a series of skills roadshows or skills camps. So each region within Scottish Rugby, we've got 5 regions, and each region will have 3 skills camps, which will run through the summer's months.
Nice, sounds awesome. Plenty going on. Where does your sort of interest come from the Scrum then? What does it all spawn from?
So I played in the front row for a number of years, played at Edinburgh Accies, and then moved back up north and played in the front row for Highland Rugby Club. But even before playing in the front row, I always had an interest in sort of strength and conditioning. So my background is as a thrower. And that's what I do now. I compete in the Highland Games in all the throwing disciplines. So we've got 8 disciplines, and I compete all over the country and abroad in the Highland Games. So always had an interest in strength sports, but that converts really nicely into obviously the S&C side of playing in the front row, which is something that we'll kind of cover within Scottish Rugby as well, with the rollout as part of the Blueprint, the new Blueprint. We're going to have a Physical Cog. So that's something that's going to be coming down the line probably next season. We're focusing on that at the moment, and it's something that we're looking to roll out next season.
Kind of having done both throwing and scrummaging, what makes what can you transfer from throwing into scrummaging? So what is a good physical makeup of a good front row player? Because that's something you obviously cover quite in depth on Scrum School.
Absolutely. So I think people are a bit scared of the front row and think that you need to be huge and strong to play there. But if you look down the years at some of Scotland's top scrummagers, we've had British and Irish Lions, and they're usually there because they're great technical scrummagers. So I think that starts, like thinking about the physical blueprint, physical cog, that starts with just having good fundamental movement. So that's being able to move well, being able to run well, being able to change direction, being able to squat, being able to hinge. So it's real fundamentals which we can start ingraining in players from a really young age. So we don't need to get them straight in the squat rack, straight onto the deadlifts. We just need to get them out on the pitch, focusing on real fundamental movements. And that's what Scrum School aims to do. So rather than go straight to an 8-on-8 scrum, we're really starting with individuals and looking at how we can build those fundamental movements. That could be, we call it scrum shape, but it's basically get into a bear crawl type position, and then we slowly start to build on that. But we might not add resistance to a scrum shape for a good couple of months. People are always quite surprised by that, but even at the top level of the game, those players, be it male or female, are putting a lot of emphasis on fundamental movements. And it's the same in the gym. Like, we can do lots of movement with broomsticks before we even get near lifting weights. So, yeah, I think if we get the fundamentals and the basics right, then we can start to build. The strength comes relatively easy.
You cannae fire a cannon from a canoe.
It's true. Mass moves mass.
So what does that mean to you then, Sinky?
I think in throwing terms, there's probably a fine line. You need to be pretty robust to compete in the Highland Games. It's the same when it comes to playing in the front row. But again, if you get the basics right and focus on the technical side, whether it be throwing or playing rugby, it's always then easy to build on that and get to the point where you're lifting heavy in the gym, which has then obviously positive results on the pitch.
I like a couple of things you said there. So first of all, there's this kind of like a fear factor on playing front row, but everything you described there, the way you train up to be an effective front row is looking at things like flexibility, stability. These are just things and good fundamentals of just playing sport in general, not even just rugby. So we talk about, you look at the skills of rugby, of running, tackling, evading, jumping, hitting a breakdown. These are all the things you described there actually contribute to the wider game. So it isn't actually as daunting, isn't it? It's just putting it in different context.
Not at all. And I think, like, gone are the days where the forwards coach says, right, forwards in the corner for the next 45 minutes, we're scrummaging. I think what Scrum School tries to teach is that we focus on individuals, and it can be thrown in at any points during training. We don't need to just focus on the front row. We can do these types of exercises with all players, not even just the forwards. Because if you think about effective sort of contact shape, or even lifting in the line out, that shape, that scrum shape that we're looking to promote is relevant in so many aspects of the game. Like, Scotty, you've played a lot of sevens rugby, a bit.
It's not been mentioned before.
But so many aspects of your game as a sevens player you would cover in Scrum School, because it's about positioning, it's about the basics of getting that technique right, whether it be throwing, lifting in the line out. It's all about getting your stance right, focusing on your core, head neutral. Like, these are all things that we're just looking to promote through Scrum School. So,
if I'm a youth coach, who am I? Who do I work with on front row stuff? Because like we talk about like where the next front rows come from and trying to get more front rows. Like all the things you described. If you were giving advice to kind of youth coaches and like who do I use this with? Who would you say?
Work with everybody.
Yeah,
everybody. There's nothing that we're covering in Scrum School that wouldn't have a positive impact on any player, be it a fullback, a winger, or a front row player. The fundamentals are the same. So. And it works both ways. So we're talking about scrum shape a lot, but also get your front row players running correctly or stepping correctly. The basics are relevant across the board, whether no matter on position, because we don't know at age 14, 15, even 16 what position players are going to end up in. So it's really important that we're covering all bases. We don't need to be experts either. We just need a basic knowledge to be able to input into our training sessions.
Love that message there.
Yeah, like fully on board with that. I think that's a great message. Just in terms of like rugby being a late specialisation sport as well, if you look at some of the modern day front row players who have, achieved a lot and have, played international rugby, a couple of our hookers at the moment were former back row players.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Grant Gilchrist was a 10 inside centre in some youth rugby as well. So, like who's to say where the next generation of front row
absolutely. And I think an interesting point on rugby being late development, James, you and I have both been development officers, so one of the things that I found throughout coaching in primary schools and then up into secondary schools is the best athletes, in terms of just functional movement and being able to run, being able to swerve, change direction, were often youngsters who had been involved with gymnastics or had maybe done some athletics, dancing even
football.
Football,
footballers.
So I
some
think
good footballers,
multi-sport, but just having that foundation, having that base, will eventually come through. So that's what we need to be focusing on, especially at youth level, is just getting the fundamentals right. And again, don't specialise. So if we are looking to do some contact positioning or some scrummaging, just do it with your whole squad.
Yeah, I was just going to try and align it a wee bit to the blueprint side of things in terms of creativity and how we can be creative within our session or practice design, that we can integrate this stuff within games as well, because the usual youth rugby schedule would consist of 1, maybe 2 sessions of training per week and a match. Like, what would be your sort of top tip, Sinky, to integrate some of this stuff, that it's not standalone?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different ways to do it. Obviously, within the blueprint, we've got skill zones, we've got wee games. I think keep things as interactive as possible, so that if we are delivering it to a wider squad, we're not maybe focusing on that skill zone so much. There's obviously some safety aspects where we have to break it right down, but for the most part, if we can just focus on the fundamental scrum shape, we can put that into wee games, no problem. And if you're able to go on Hive and have a look at the sort of Scrum School resource, there's lots of ideas for just wee 2-minute games that you can throw into a wider session. So I think that's the best way to do it, is keep it fun, keep it interactive.
Yeah, just from a conditioning point of view as well, playing games and wrestling, for example, is pretty sneaky fitness.
Yeah.
So, a 2-minute game aligned with some 20-30 second bouts of wrestling would constitute a pretty good fun session. And also it's a way of managing contact as well, because you're still developing contact competence, contact confidence, as well as a host of other things.
100%. Yeah, the higher frequency we can get in within our wider training sessions, the better. Again, we don't know who's going to come through the pathway. The aim of Scrum School is to have as many players capable of stepping into the front row if required, but also to raise the kind of awareness and interest in that position. As a nation, we are sort of lacking in volume coming through. So if we can start to just get it out there in club environments, school environments, we're going to be in a much stronger position come those transitions at like under 16s, under 18s into senior rugby. So
there's a thing, isn't it? Like, the blueprint games are designed to kind of like be quite quick and quite handling based. So actually, how can we integrate some scrum stuff within that? And we talked about, you said something really interesting earlier about gone are the days where forwards go off in a corner, usually the bit of floodlight in the corner of an old scrum machine, and hit the sled for 45 minutes. Actually, in a game, you're running around, high bits of energy. You got to do a set piece, do lots of high bits. So I like the idea of kind of like in the game, can you restart with like a 1v1, a 3v3, then into kind of like barbarians or your Highlanders touch, and then again into another set piece to kind of replicate what actually players are going to go through. Nearest 3, don't have to be front row out like that.
And then from a a transfer point of view, a set piece would be an event within a game.
Yeah.
So you don't get to practice 10 scrums in a row in a game.
No.
10 lineouts, 10 kickoffs. You do it once and then you adapt and you get on with it.
Yeah.
Wales France a few years ago they did. Remember
that? I've seen it time and time again though, and actually almost made the mistake of doing it just recently. So I was delivering on the Caledonia North Player Development Hub, and we did 45 minutes on scrum shape, which was great. Loved it.
Yeah.
Got to coach again.
That corner.
Which is always good. But then we put them into games.
Yeah.
So during the 45 minutes, techniques were brilliant. I was so excited. Everything was looking really good. As soon as it went into the game, it fell apart. I didn't see anything that we'd done within that 45-minute session.
Yeah. So
I think even in that environment, which is kind of a step above club level for those players, we need to really think about the way that we're delivering that sort of, I suppose, specialist skill. And with that age group, we are starting to focus a bit more on positional skills. So it is fine still having the skill focus, but if possible, throw it into games as much as we can. The other important thing is that because we're focusing on fundamentals, it doesn't have to be done when you're at training. It can be done at home.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it?
That's absolutely massive. Yeah. So, like, if we can have individuals doing the right things, we then start to build scrum pyramids. So you don't need to have 15 forwards at training. You can work with one player if you need to, because we then build some scrum pyramids, throw in a hooker and a number 8. You've got a full scrum. So
simple equipment as well. You don't need a scrum sled of a machine, a Swiss ball, a couple of bands, and you can replicate all sorts of pressure.
That's it, yeah. And again, you'll see that on the Scrum School resource, is that it's minimal equipment required. To be honest, you don't need anything. You just need yourself. So,
go on.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a wee bit more about like our Scott skills. Which ones do you think would jump out for a front row player?
Yeah, for me, you need tenacity. Yeah. I think you need to be tenacious, and that's in training and on the pitch. And it's one of the things that, like, as a teenager and into early 20s, I definitely didn't have that in my training. It's a tough thing to coach, but I think it's one that we need to focus on. And it only really comes through creating an environment where there's some competitive, there's a competitive nature to it. So I wouldn't shy away from doing that, even with youth players. Put them in environments where they have to compete against their peers. And especially when it comes to the front row, we can't get away from the fact that it does become physical. So we need to throw elements of that into our training as well.
And that's maybe like where you do that integrated into games, like 1v1 battles, right? We're going to start this game, 1v1 battle, me v Sync, and we know how that's going to go.
Yeah.
But that's a good way.
I'd help you. I'd come and help you.
I think it would take more than me and you. But that's how you create that kind of tenacity that you got one shot to do it. And we talk about the difference between block practice, as you mentioned, and then how it translates into a game. So I think self-organised, you mentioned something like flexibility. You can't develop flexibility in like 10 minutes in a session. It has to be done away from the pitch.
Has to, yeah.
Long-term flexibility is like, how do the players self-organise to do that themselves?
Yeah, but allow them to set their own targets around that as well.
Yeah,
I think that's really important, because then they're then accountable for their own learning.
Definitely.
And I'm well aware that there's so many aspects of the game, but I do firmly believe that if we can get the fundamentals of that scrum shape right, whether it be, again, a winger, a fullback, or a 10, it's going to have a positive impact on their game.
I suppose just to kind of like bring things to a full circle, to a close, is that Scrum School said there's loads to come. It's the skill camps you mentioned about, just what are those and what they target at, and why should people sign up for them?
Yes, so obviously we've had the practical workshops, which is a glimpse of what we can be delivering out in clubland or school land. With the skills camps, it's going to allow us the time to really focus on, I suppose, those movements and how we build them up to the point of doing a full scrum. So we'll look at how we incorporate them within games. Within each region, there'll be one workshop in May, one in June, and one in July. So we'd encourage clubs to nominate players, and it doesn't have to be current front row players. So if you have maybe some backs or some back row players, for example, that you think might have the attributes and the skills required to play in the front row, we'd really encourage you to nominate those players to come along to the skills camps. There's also opportunities for coaches to come and get involved as well. So the idea is it will build from 1 month to another. So as I said, first workshop regionally, there'll be 5 is in May, 1 in June, 1 in July. By the end of July, we're hoping that we'll have produced a lot of new front row players and given coaches the skills and the knowledge required to comfortably deliver those positions.
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? We've seen a trend not just across Scottish rugby in general, of games at community level being cancelled because of the lack of front row, and this is a great opportunity to kind of future-proof the game, bring a new skill set to a new set of players that might actually get them involved in the game longer. I know that I naturally as a back went from into the park and then actually stopped when they asked me to go second row. That was too much for me, but I could have been interested in something a bit different. I've been trained up and shown how to do it. So I think it's a really good opportunity.
Absolutely, and I would say to players, give it a go.
Yeah,
come along to the skills camps. You might love it. Give it a go.
If not, Sinky will find you.
Nice. So just to wrap up then, thanks very much, Sinky. Great to have you on. Didn't quite chat about sevens as much as I would have liked, but
Sinky's disappointed at that.
Sinky was so keen to chat Scrum.
Open Sevens winner 2007.
Nice. As well as former Scottish Highland Games champ.
Yeah, I've got the World Championships in August this year in Canada, so training hard for that.
Class.
Blueprint on tour to Canada? No?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sinky. That was awesome.
Cheers, guys. Thanks
Cheers.
for having me on.
Bye.